And welcome back, everybody, to another episode of Bubba the Bat Flip, episode 72, continuing our reviews of our previews of the positions for the 2021 fantasy baseball season. Tonight, we get to the starting pitchers, which we talked about a month or so ago. So we'll go over the kind of a handful of debates in the top 200 ADP, some shots afterwards. Got a lot of good listener questions to go over. And for those keeping track at home, we're using NFBC ADP from the online drafts. We changed it over online drafts since February 1st because there's 14 drafts in the books. So get an idea there. You can find me on Twitter at BDentric and the Batflip portion of the show on Twitter at BatFlipCrazy. Toby, how we doing, man?
Doing great, Bubba. Just plugging along here. March is right around the corner. Our next podcast will be in the month of March, which is the month for drafting fantasy baseball. So that's very exciting. I know the baseball pods tournament has begun, and so that'll be a lot of fun, a good opportunity to get exposure for a lot of podcasts, especially ones that don't have the huge followings. Definitely hope that you guys will consider voting for us. If you listen to the pod, which you clearly do if you're hearing this message, and you like the pod, then vote for us.
Yeah,
we would really appreciate it.
Yeah, we're not going to hire any bots this year. We're not going to do anything like that. So if you like us, take us. But we'd love to make a good showing. But it is what it is. It's already getting kind of interesting and fun out there. So we'll see how it goes. I think we're up on Thursday, if I remember correctly.
Okay.
Could be wrong.
Thursday's a good day.
I don't even know.
Good day.
Yeah, I don't even know. But we did say starting pitcher show. And look, Nick Pollock said, did someone say starting pitchers? Yes, we did, Nick. Yes, we did. So stay tuned. Stay tuned. You are one of the pitching gurus. So tell us everything we're getting wrong when we talk about this.
PitchCon was a blast.
PitchCon was awesome, and I'm so happy. That reminds me, Nick, on Pitcher List on their YouTube page, it came out on Tuesday, so you can access all the presentations on YouTube, which would be pretty cool because I'm not smart enough to figure out the Twitch, so I've been waiting for YouTube to come out. I messaged Fast on Saturday while they were doing stuff, and I wanted to go back and listen to some stuff. I'm like, hey, when he's on YouTube, like last year, I could watch him right away. He's like, we're doing stuff to him. They'll be there Tuesday. Okay, perfect. Sounds good. I'll figure it out from there. So looking forward to it. Always goodies on that one. Let's talk starting pitchers. Starting pitcher review, preview, the goodies. Like I said, ADPs from the online since 2-1. The big three still goes to DeGrom, Cole, Bieber, which it's pretty much been that way for the most part. DeGrom topped out at 99 today in his pitching, by the way. If anybody's keeping track at home, pretty good stuff. We don't have to go deep on this. You're still good with this being the main three in their own tier?
Yeah, definitely. It's been interesting over the last little bit. I think since the NLDH seems a little bit more firm, DeGrom's been going ahead of Cole, which is a reversal from earlier on in drafts. I mean, all three of these guys, Bieber obviously has COVID, so we got to monitor that and see how he does when he comes back from camp. But given, it seems like he's got mild symptoms, although that doesn't really tell us necessarily how it's going to impact somebody long term. So we'll just kind of have to see about that. But I think all three of them are great. If I had to order them right now, I would probably go with DeGrom. I think I had Cole ahead of him earlier on in the season, but I do think that the NLDH does make a difference. I mean, they're so close, it makes a difference. I maybe have a little less injury concern with Cole than DeGrom, but I think DeGrom is just nasty. I mean, he's just unbelievably good. So is Cole, but the AL East is going to be a little bit tougher for a variety of different reasons, I think. So that's how I'd order them. I think Bieber a firm third, but I don't feel bad about having Bieber. I think he's actually my most owned or the guy that I have on the most number of teams. I only have one share of Cole in 13 drafts, which is kind of sad. But
wow, we'll have to change that. DeGrom, Cole, Bieber. Like I've never had a problem going DeGrom or Cole. Like if you want to use the DH thing, I still think that the DH is a possibility. I'm not giving it up till I see that first pitch on opening day because these guys are going to want as much money as possible. So they're doing something like I can't remember where I heard it. I think it was on the Baseball HQ podcast. I think Joe Sheehan said last year they expanded the playoffs the night before opening day. So like literally until I see that first pitch, I've kind of been that way. And everyone can look back on previous shows. Like I think it's all about money. Follow the money. They want the money. So I still think it's a possibility, but we'll see. It is a boost to DeGrom. I'll give you that much. And it's interesting looking at the ADPs. DeGrom's gone first overall and as low as 8th. Cole's gone as high as 3rd and as low as 9th. Bieber as high as 6th, as low as 12th. So they've done their thing. They're pretty much the first 3 off the board, and I don't see that changing anytime soon. Bieber is in camp already, so his mild symptoms appear to be mild. We'll see how that all plays out, but everything looks okay for Shane Bieber right now. All right, as we go a little farther down the draft board, the 4th and 5th starting pitchers off the board. Trevor Bauer at pick 13, Darvish around pick 15, both gone as high as 10. This is a tough one for me because I have a little bit of Yu Darvish. I have 0 Trevor Bauer. I'm very scared to draft Trevor Bauer. What are you doing with these two?
Yeah, I'm scared to draft Trevor Bauer as well. I had an opportunity in my most recent draft to do that. I mean, I think the thing with Bauer is we've seen him be up in these positions before. We've seen him fall back. I don't think he's the pitcher that we saw last year. I think there was just a number of different things going on, whether it was the NL Central just being an incredibly weak hitting division last year. He had the BABIP luck. He had the strand rate luck. He had the home run luck, at least compared to what he's done before. We obviously saw the spin rate jump, which I think has been a primary focus of what a lot of people have talked about, but we haven't really seen a change in the metrics. Like they were slightly better than previous years, but nothing to justify what he was able to accomplish. Obviously, the Dodgers is a great place for him to end up. He ends up in the NL. He ends up on a perennial winner. He should get access to a bunch of wins. Even with the dead end ball is like helping him because he's a very much a fly ball pitcher. So there's a lot of reasons to like Bauer, but I just can't be confident in the ratios for me. I mean, and it may just be also like I have to come clean. It may be a little bit of a bias of just not really digging the guy. So there's that. And I think with Darvish, since he's developed the cutter, he's been a very good pitcher. And it's obviously about a year that we've had information on it, but he just has such a deep arsenal. He's got a number of different pitches that can hurt you. He's in a great situation as well with the Padres. I know there's some chatter about, the Padres going to the 6-man rotation. And maybe that'll happen. But at this point in time, until I hear something a little bit more definitive, all of that assumes that people are healthy, assumes that they want to throw, Morion or whatever on the 6th day, assumes that they want to mess with their regular starting pitchers' schedules. So we'll see what ends up happening. But I still think Darvish is an elite option. I struggle a little bit between, who my number 4 is after those guys. I do kind of like Giolito a lot. I think there's less concerns about the volume. I think there's less injury concerns. The upside is tremendous. And I think the situation with the White Sox is really good too. And he's a fly ball pitcher as well. So he's helped out by the dead end ball. So I don't think you can mess up going with either of those 3, to be honest with you. But I would have Bauer at the end of that. I just don't feel great about drafting him.
Well, we'll talk about Giolito next, but
no, I jumped ahead.
Yeah, but we got some comments over here. I wanted to shout. You speak about the NLDH and Justin Mason will arrive because he's been with me on this one. I've heard him talk about it. The DH will appear, and then shout out to our buddy Rob DiPietro, Pool Hitter Podcast. Go check that out. He says hello, and the reigning TGFBI champion. He believes in the DH as well, Kevin Hastings. So check all that stuff out. And Rob wants to know, but what about Trevor Bauer's Conor McGregor's flag off the mound? Well, if you see how Conor McGregor's fighting the last few times, it won't go too well for him. So let's put it that way. I pulled up the pitch leaderboard for Alex Chamberlain, and it's fun to look at because everyone talks about how Bauer's dominated last year, which he did, beat out Yu Darvish for the Cy Young. But you look at swinging strike rate, Bauer 14.1, Darvish 16. Called strike rate 17.3 to 19.3. So he had about a 4% Darvish had about a 4% CSW advantage on Trevor Bauer, which I like to see quite a bit. And I apologize. And the hard hit rates is where things differ a bit, and the dynamic hard hit rate. And this is where it gets interesting to me. Is Bauer had a 38.2% hard hit rate, Darvish 34.8%. Dynamic hard hit rate 9.2% for Darvish, 21% for Trevor Bauer. 20. That's a astronomically large dynamic hard hit rate. It feels like it's not calculated properly. So that's one to possibly look at. But you just look at all the peripherals. Bauer was good what makes me wonder is, was he an accumulator? Like his ERA was great. Don't get me wrong there. Like that was good, but he threw so many innings. Did he just like all the extra peripheral stats that help him out a bunch? Because you look at the basics of it, and it's pretty messy overall. And it's one thing. And the other thing with Bauer in recent years, you've seen him be really, really good, and you've seen him be mediocre to bad. It fluctuates so much. There's never really a fine line. It's one or the other, it feels like. And as your fourth starting pitcher, you really need to figure that one out pretty quickly. So I go Darvish over Bauer. I'm also not as concerned about Darvish's health because it's been a few years since we've seen that take place. So that kind of argument doesn't fly with me as much anymore. All right, the next two pitchers off the board: Lucas Giolito, Aaron Nola. Pick 18 for Giolito, 23 for Nola. I have Giolito as the fourth pitcher off the board as well, like you were mentioning. But how do you go between Gio and Nola? Because I know Nola, they have jumping some people also.
Yeah, I mean, I like both. Actually, in my most recent draft, those the two starting pitchers I grabbed was Giolito, I think at 10, and Nola at whatever is after 10, 21, I think. I could never figure it out. Even the first two picks, I could never figure it out what numbers they are. But yeah, I think Giolito, I just think there's more K upside there for me. I think there's obviously not, the control is not as good, but I think when you just look at the overall package, from a skills perspective, I think Giolito is much better, at least from a strikeout perspective. I think he's on a better team, even though the Phillies offense is good. I think he's got probably a better bullpen as well. AL Central is not a bad division by any means to be in, I think, especially if you're on the White Sox, right? Because if you're on the White Sox, then the best offense you're probably facing is the Twins, which the Twins have a fine offense, but I think they're mediocre, across baseball. So you're dealing with, all kind of at or below league average offenses from my perspective. Even if the Royals are better than I think a lot of people think they are going to be, I think Cleveland is not that great of an offense. And I just, I really like his situation. Nola does have the control aspect down. The O swing is really high. He has that great, he can go to the curve, he can go to the change. Those are excellent. Giolito's fastball is better, than Nola's. I think that's the one area where Nola has a little bit of a weakness. But with both of them, you can count on volume. You can count on them just being, I think, really solid pitchers. Even with Nola, in 2019, he had pretty much like the worst half season he could have. And his numbers at the end of the season wouldn't make you super happy where you drafted him. But he was still like, I think, a 3.8 ERA or something, and like a 1.25 WHIP at the end of the season. And while that's not great for your second round starting pitcher, it's also not going to be the reason that you necessarily lose a league. So for both of them, I think the upside's great, and I think there's a high floor there too.
Yeah, I think they're both sneaky good. Nola's a guy that I keep looking back in on because a lot of people I respect are very, very excited on him. I'm starting to slowly gain some more interest on him. But Giolito, I've been in love with from the get-go. Big fan of his. The way he's talking in camp already gets me pretty excited about what he's doing. I know he's trying to I believe he's working on his curveball some more. He wants to add another pitch to the mix to really get things going, which will make things pretty exciting if you can get 4 solid pitches going out there. But you look at both these guys, there's not a ton to get cranky about. Like Nola, 50% ground ball rate last year, which is phenomenal in that hitter's ballpark. That's great. They both have good CSW rates. Deserved ERA of 2.6 for Giolito, 3.01 for Nola, both phenomenal. The barrel FIP 2.95 for Giolito, 2.68 for Nola. These guys are very, very good. Like I don't have a whole lot to dissect when it comes to these two. Great strikeout rates. Walk rates could be a little better for Giolito. It gets a little painty at times and can get a little wild. But you mentioned the division, much better for Nola for Giolito than Nola. So I got Giolito as my fourth, and so I'll definitely take him over Nola. But I could see myself jumping Darvish and Bauer with Nola if things change a little bit in drafts. So that could be something. That's one reason why I haven't really. It seems like I end up with Giolito in the back end of the 1-2 area instead of Darvish. So I don't have to really worry about the debate. But I could see Nola jumping Darvish for me as well. Like that could be something done in future drafts.
What I really like about you said something that I really liked. You said nothing to get cranky about, and I think we should have a segment called "Getting Cranky,"
Getting cranky.
You know, we're like, if there's like a player that we don't like, we're just like, we're gonna get cranky with it, you know. So that's what I would like to have happen.
Yeah, we'll have to work on that. If we get knocked out of the first round of the odds, we'll have a cranky segment next go around. We can definitely do something like that. The next round of starting pitchers, we have Luis Castillo 10th off the board, Flaherty 11th off the board, Kershaw 12th, going to pick 27, 28, and 30 respectively. I grouped these three together because they're drafted close together. We got Luis Castillo, very popular with guys like SP Streamer. I like him a lot. You got Flaherty coming off a rough season, but everyone was hyped going into last year. Then you got Kershaw, the boring vet that just continues to be awesome. So what do you do with these three?
Yeah, I think I like Castillo a lot. You know, I think when we talked about him on the preview podcast, the starting pitcher preview podcast, you know, his four-seam fastball had phenomenal growth in the swinging strike rate. Although that's something that I'm a little leery about all these NL Central pitchers is like, if you look at their four-seam fastballs, they all took like significant jumps up, like Castillo, Woodruff, you know, which backed a lot of the gains that they had from a skill perspective. But I think Castillo has that changeup he can go to. His fastball's improving, slider's good. So I think for him, you know, to be my, you know, first starter, I think is fine. You know, would love to include him in kind of a pocket aces deal. That would work for me as well. So I like him the most, I would say, of that group. After that, I mean, you know, Kershaw, you know, he always finds a way to be really good. You know, at the end of last year, his velocity tailed off a little bit. You know, the skills tailed off a little bit, but he was still phenomenal. Some questions about what the volume is going to be, especially coming off of, you know, the World Series victory, some of the talent that they've added to the rotation, the depth. I think that's always kind of a little bit of a concern, especially with somebody at his age, but at least you feel good about locking down the ratio and locking down the wins, which are really going to be very, very important. And then with Flaherty, you know, I've always had a tough time getting behind Flaherty. I wasn't behind him last year. You know, he had that really good second half in 2019 that buoyed his value a lot. But from a skill perspective, he's maybe like a little bit of a notch below. I could definitely see him taking that next step. And he pitches in the NL Central, which is great. You know, he pitches in one of the better ballparks for pitchers to pitch in, which is phenomenal. So I don't necessarily think that it's a bad pick. I just have not been able to get on board. I don't have any shares of him this year, but I could be wrong. I would not be surprised to see him take a next step this year, especially just with the motivation of this past year and the struggles and never really having a chance to get going. So I think all of them are fine options. Castillo is one of the three that I actually have drafted this year. I haven't drafted Kershaw and I haven't drafted Flaherty at all.
Yeah, no, Castillo I'm a huge fan of. I've drafted him in a lot of drafts. He's one of the perks if you draft in the front end. So he's usually not always sitting there late second round, sometimes into the early third if you want to play that game. But you can snag him if you go hitter early. He can be your ace. If you go a Cole or DeGrom early, he can be your number two for your pocket aces, like you said. He just fits that mold so well because he brings that usually a pretty decent floor into the action. Like he can get walk happy because he's painting too much or whatever. But when he's actually in the zone, he's ridiculously filthy. And he gets a lot of ground balls, a lot of missed contact, a lot of weak contact because that changeup just drops off the table. So I like Castillo a lot. That's why he survives in Great American Small Park just fine. Then you got the rest of the NL Central, like you mentioned. I believe I got to double check. I think they're still playing the AL Central and Interleague this year. I think that's what they tried to do with scheduling, but I'm not 100%. Regardless, it's going to be a good spot for Castillo. The only caveat I'll say is there's still a good chance Castillo and or Gray gets traded. So that'll make things a little interesting. But for now, he's on the Reds, and I still like him quite a bit. Then the Flaherty-Kershaw thing is really tricky. It's like I love Kershaw. I just feel he's going a little too early. I'd rather have a mid-round 3 to back end of round 3. We're talking 15-teamers. So if you want to say 12-teamer, end of round 3 into round 4 is probably where I'm looking at Kershaw. It's just because I love what he does, so it's kind of like hypocritical of me. But I am concerned they're going to baby him, like Toby said. And next thing you know, if you drafted a guy hoping for like 170 and now you're getting 140, and we'll talk about this later when it comes to the question we had, a listener question about the 6-man rotations. It's a big difference in what you're drafting, and you got to know that Kershaw, there's a great chance this happens. So it's tricky in that respect. Then Flaherty, I've never been able to get him right. I wasn't on him at all last year. I'm not going to take a victory lap on that. That team's COVID situation was just nasty. Like that's not what I predicted. I predicted he was going to get hit, not hit with COVID. So that's a different story. But you look at all his numbers, good strikeout guy. When he does get hit, he gets hit hard though. And he gives up a lot more fly balls than ground balls. He gets benefited by pitching at that home ballpark and in that division. So that's good for him. But now you're leaving that division. So does he take a hit on the road games outside of that division? Something to keep in mind as well. I still think he's very, very good, but I still don't think he's as good as he showed in the second half of 2019 that everyone's in love with. He's kind of an in-between aspect there. So I'll go Castillo, Kershaw, Flaherty, but Castillo is pretty much the only one I'm grabbing in this set right now. All right, the next grouping we have is Zach Gallen, 14th off the board, Snell, 15th off the board, Gallen at 39, Snell like 0.3 picks after him according to ADP. So they're going right next to each other. It's an interesting one because Gallen started out like a man on fire last year, kind of faded a little bit at the end, but not bad. Snell, new ballpark, new team. Everyone's thinking he's going to pitch a ton of innings. Might have a 6-man rotation. Who knows? So what are you doing with Gallen and Snell?
Yeah, I mean, I haven't drafted either one of them. This is kind of the pocket of pitchers that I'm trying to avoid. Although I think with Gallen, I mean, Gallen's got enough. I mean, he's, if you've heard a lot of folks talking, I know Eno's mentioned it. I think Alex Chamberlain's mentioned it as well. I think Gallen is one of these guys who's able to suppress contact because of the command that he has. I mean, I think it's just excellent. My concern with Gallen is the fastball. I mean, it's not even remotely close to a dominant pitch for him. 4.8% swinging strike rate on the 4-seam. But then he also has, a fine slider, but then the curveball and the changeup are all excellent, and he throws all 3 pitches about the same. So with that type of a diverse repertoire, it feels pretty good. And I wonder if he lost a little bit of velo. No, he was actually up 0.2 mile per hour. That's interesting. His 4-seam performed so much more poorly this year, even though the velo was about the same. So I'm not sure what exactly that's about. My one concern a little bit with Gallen is, I think the D-backs are just in kind of rebuild mode. I don't know how formal it is. I think it's formal. Once they decided to trade Marte last year, they will have decent pieces in that lineup, but I just don't love that division. You have to go against the Dodgers, you have to go against the Padres, and then you have some of your starts against the Rockies that are at Coors. Although Gallen, I think, was one of the few guys who did decently well there. So I just don't. I'm not in love with the situation. I'm not in love with the situation enough to take him where he's going right now. I'd rather wait a round or two and target some of the guys that I think we're going to talk about a little bit later. So Gallen, I'm not that interested in. Snell, obviously, there's no doubt about the talent for Snell, but again, it's questions about health, number of innings that he can throw. I think he'll be good when he does pitch, but again, he's not efficient with his pitches. It doesn't allow him to get deep into games. Whether you think that was the Rays pulling him or not, I don't necessarily think that's what it is. I just think he's inefficient with his pitches. He walks a lot of guys. He goes deep into a lot of counts, so he's not able to get that type of depth. So I mean, I think he's fine. Super high skilled, no question about it, but not somebody that I want to get at this point in the draft. I think I have him on one team because he fell to like the mid 50s. So if he falls around there, then I think he might be worth the upside if you already have a starting pitcher on your team and maybe you're looking for a little bit of ceiling from your starting pitcher. But otherwise, despite the skills, I'm kind of out on him. So I think with both of them, I'm not that interested, but I think they're fine pitchers.
Yeah, I liked Gallen a lot more going into last year when he was drafted about 100 picks later. That was a lot more fun. He's a very good pitcher. It's just like you said, on a team that's probably not going to win a lot of baseball games, they don't have to push him if they kind of want to save his arm for the future because he should be one of their top pitchers for the future. Or you never know, they might just trade him and go get more prospects. So there's a lot of scenarios. I doubt they trade him because he's still so young, but nothing surprises me with Arizona now. The starting Marte trade made no sense to me at all. So Gallen's interesting, but yeah, he limits the hard contact, gets like a 44% ground ball rate, decent strikeout rate, limits the barrels. He had like almost a 7% or so barrel rate last year, deserved barrel rate of 4.9%. So he does a really good job of limiting the damage, deserved ERA of 3.06. Lot to like about Zach Gallen. I have no complaints besides where he's going in the draft. It's just not ideal in that scenario. And Snell, again, I listen to podcasts all day, so I apologize to where this came from, but it was a very, very, very good stat. And I remember mentioning on the preview before where Snell said in his press conference he's excited to play for a team that's going to let him pitch and all these things. But and maybe it's still the Rays, but I don't think it was the Rays because they've documented third time through the rotation with Snell's sketchy. Last year, I think he went in the sixth inning one time, and he hasn't gone 7 or more innings since April of 2019. So he really hasn't gone deep in game. When he pitches, he's great. Strikeout rate's good, swinging strike rates, called strikes, CSW is phenomenal. Hard contact's a little high, but like he had over 9% barrel rate last year, but deserved barrels 4.2. So do with that what you wish. His deserved ERA was still 4.17. It's not like he was lighting the world on fire. It's one of those guys that if I'm wrong on him this year, I'll be wrong. He's just not going to be on my roster. I'm not going to put up with the headache. And it's like you see these teams with 6-man rotations. Like Darvish, you could see getting most of his starts, but you could also see the Padres telling Snell, yeah, you're a part of the 6-man part. We're going to just take it easy with you. So I wouldn't be shocked by any of that. So I'll be passing on Blake Snell this year. I'll take Gallen if I have to in this group. Probably not taking either one of them. The next set of pitchers are the 17th and 18th pitchers off the board. Kenta Maeda picked 49. Lance Lynn picked 53. Maeda coming off a monster 2020 season. Lance Lynn is an innings-eating machine and now joins the Chicago White Sox. So what are you doing with these two?
Yeah, I think they're both very interesting. For Maeda, the concern is a little bit of volume as well as just some regression that's due his way, given some of the BABIP and strand rate and all that jazz that we saw last year. That said, I mean, there was a pitch mix change that he had that underlay or underlie that all those changes that did take place. And so he's not going to walk a ton of guys. I think he's going to be a really nice whip, contributor. I think the ratio should be solid. The major question for me with Maeda is volume, but he's not a bad like SP2 to have for sure. I like how you paired these two because Lynn, it's kind of the opposite. Like you're not necessarily expecting anything elite from the ratios, but the going and the Ks are just going to be massive, especially going to the White Sox. He's going to go deep into that game. He's going to go deep in the games. He's not going to have very stiff competition, at least comparatively. I think. I mean, we obviously got to see his schedule, but I think he's a guy you can throw pretty much every single time out there, and I think you're going to get a strikeout an inning, a 1.2 to 1.25 WHIP, and 3.5 ERA or something like that, and that'll be great. And especially if he can actually approach 200 innings this year. I don't have it in front of me, but I think he threw almost 80 innings last year. I think he could be a huge benefit, and they have a very good bullpen in Chicago, so they won't just leave him in there, like the Rangers did on his last start to get to that 100 pitch mark for the game and destroy so many of our fantasy teams. But I think they're both solid. I haven't been able to grab Lynn just because of where he's going. Generally, if I'm getting my aces, in the first couple rounds, then the third and the fourth round are where I snag some of the hitters that I like in that spot. And he normally goes around that time. So I actually don't have Lynn on any of my teams. I don't have Maeda on any of my teams either. But it doesn't mean that I don't like them. Maybe just hasn't worked out quite yet. But you never know. Maybe it will.
Yeah, these two guys are like conundrums for me. Like I love Lance Lynn for the volume aspect, especially on a season where there's so many question marks with innings pitched. He did throw 84 pitches last year for the Rangers, over 200 the year before. You have to imagine 180 plus is very much in the cards this year. I think most projection sites have him for like 185. I wouldn't be shocked if he goes over that one. So he's just one of those guys. As long as he's healthy, he's going to just throw innings for you. it's just you look at his numbers and it's scary. Like he had a 113.4 max exit velocity, a 14% dynamic hard hit rate, 5.4% barrel rate, but a deserved barrel rate of 8.8%. Only a 29% ground ball rate. Now he's going to that ballpark that's a little sketch for it's for pitchers if you start throwing it around like that. So it's a very interesting scenario. Like even his swinging strike rate's lower than most. He relies on just volume to accumulate those innings and those strikeouts and all that good stuff. So it's tough with Lynn, but those innings are clutch in fantasy. Very, very important. So I like him quite a bit. And then there's Maeda, who I don't have on many rosters either, because you look at him and it's like, okay, 25.5% hard hit rate, that's good. But an 11.1% dynamic hard hit rate, 5.7% blast rate, those are very, very hitter-friendly numbers right there. But then, like, you look at the alternative, 7% barrel rate, like a 3.9% deserved barrel rate. So gets a little plus there. 39% ground ball rate. That's good. So he's one that just concerns me because I think he ran so pure last year. Like, so pure. Like, can he do it? Like he had a Wellbacon, a 299, but an ex-Wellbacon, a 360. It's like eventually regression has to come. And, like, Lynn's, he could regress a little to the positive, possibly, maybe to the negative. Like, he's kind of right there in the middle, where Maeda was so positive last year. He could still be very good, but what you're expecting when you draft him feels like he's not going to give you, is what really, really concerns me with Kenta Maeda. And the other perk to Kenta Maeda last year, we were all loving him going out of LA to Minnesota, but he was getting drafted so much later than he is now. So it was so much more enticing to take the chance, and it paid off. He's not really that guy anymore. Now he has to be an ace where you're taking him, where, like I said, if he regresses like I think he will, he'll still be very good, but you can get a guy like that in another 30 to 40 picks possibly, maybe later. So that's where I am at on these two. It's very, very tough for me to pull the trigger on them. But I understand if you do, because what they could bring to the table. I think I like Lynn's floor better than Maeda's, if that makes any sense. So I'm kind of torn on those two. All right, next two pitchers off the board, Carrasco and Strasburg. Carlos Carrasco, the 23rd, Strasburg, 25th. 64th for Carrasco, 66th for Strasburg. I wanted to bring these two to the forefront. Carrasco, veteran reliever or veteran starter, pretty reliable. Now with the Mets. Strasburg, he's throwing already out of the bullpen. He's throwing bullpen sessions. Apparently everything's going great. He's, quote unquote, fully recovered from his surgery. We know if Strasburg pitches well, he's usually up like a top 35-ish, 40 pick, not 66. So maybe this is perceived value. Where are you going with Carrasco and Strasburg?
Yeah, I like Carrasco a lot. Skills were really great last year, and they got better as the season progressed. So I really like him. Obviously, pitching for the Mets, in that stadium, that's going to be really helpful to him as well. So I like Cookie a lot. I have him on a handful of teams so far this year. Strasburg, I've stayed away from. Maybe if I see the health in the spring training, but last year was kind of the only time I've ever had Strasburg on any of my teams, and so maybe it's a little bitter taste in my mouth. But it is an interesting injury, right? You don't really have like carpal tunnel happening all that often, and from everything I've read, it's not necessarily something that I don't know. I don't know if I'm remembering it correctly, but that lingers or they anticipate impacting him, in the same way post-surgery. So, it's very different than like if it was a shoulder or an elbow or something like that, a forearm. So, we'll see what ends up happening. But the thing is, if he is healthy during spring, then that means that he's going to get pushed up. And so I'll probably be out. So like Carrasco a lot. Just everything is beautiful from him. Like the O swing, doesn't walk a lot of guys. He walked a decent amount of guys in 2020 this past year, but if you look at kind of the rolling average for him, the walk rate declined precipitously as the year progressed. I think as he got a little bit more comfortable back on the mound after being out for an entire year. So feel really good about Cookie. Strasburg, staying away from him again. If he does look healthy this spring, then I think his cost is just going to shoot up, and when that's the case, then I'll be out for different reasons.
Yeah, no, you pretty much nailed it. Big Cookie fan as well. If he can be like my SP3, pretty darn happy about that. The strikeout rate's phenomenal. You mentioned the walk rates because people point to that as a massive concern, but they got better as the year went on, and I think in the National League, the walk rates are going to be phenomenal. You mentioned the walk rates because people point to that as a massive concern, but they got better as the year went on, and I think in the National League, the walk rates are going to be phenomenal. You mentioned the walk rates because people point to that as a massive concern, but they got better as the year went on, and I think in the National League, think in that division, it's a little trickier, but I think he'll be just fine overall. I wouldn't be too concerned about that. And then with Strasburg, if he was healthy and still going here, I'd be much more inclined. But I'm with you. If he's healthy in spring, he's going higher. So it's very, very then we're talking about a comparison of Maeda Lynn Strasburg or even Gallen Snell Strasburg. And it's like, where does Strasburg fit in there? And it gets kind of murky. So I'll probably pass at that point, because now you're hoping for like 140 innings out of Strasburg, or maybe 150, and that's just hoping for a lot, I think. So give me Cookie all day long.
And he's called Cookie. So
yeah, he's sweet.
You just gotta. That was good. You just gotta chow down.
Chow down on some Cookie. All right, the next 3-pack we got here. We got Hungjin Ryu, the 26th pitcher off the board. Zach Plesac, 27. Sonny Gray, 29. Ryu's ADP of 70. Plesac, 71. Sonny Gray, 71.5. So they're all going right around each other. And it's like Ryu could be pitching in Dunedin, potentially Buffalo later in the year. We don't know. Plesac, we know his story. Sonny Gray's in Cincinnati for now. We'll see. How do you approach these three?
Yeah, with Ryu, I haven't been able to get behind him. I haven't drafted him yet. I think one of the reasons is because he's kind of he's a Kyle Hendricks, type with a little bit more K upside, I think. But the divisional is a little bit tougher. There was a little bit of skill slippage last year, I think. And if I want to get like a Hendricks type, I could also always wait around and get the Hendricks himself. Or I could wait 2 rounds and I could get like Greinke or somebody like that. So I just feel like where he's going, I never end up wanting to get him. Although I don't necessarily think that it's a bad pick. I think he's fine. With the other 2 guys you mentioned, Gray, I'm not that into. The walk rate scares me. As does, some of the velocity dip that he experienced last year, and the fact that the Reds want to trade him. Could be nothing, but it raises enough concerns for me where, I'm not really in on him at all. Which, last year it looked really foolish in the first half, of 2020, because I wasn't in on him last year either, and then it looked better the second half. So we'll see what he ends up doing there. Certainly the skills are all there, but he's never been able to get the control down quite as you'd like. With Plesac, I had an opportunity to dig into him a little bit in more depth doing my presentation. I understand the excitement about him, but the one thing that I can't necessarily explain, and maybe somebody has explained it, is, he saw a dip in velocity on his fastball, and yet his secondaries improved very dramatically. But none of them really stands out from like a metrics perspective, like in terms of whether it's horizontal break, whether it's vertical break, there's just nothing, whether it's spin rate, like nothing really jumps out about those secondaries. And if you look at his rolling average graph, he actually in 2019, when he first pitched, he actually had similar metrics for a little bit during that season before the regression kind of turned against him a little. So I just I'm not there at the price. I see the interest. I see why people like him a lot because of what he did last year, but I just can't get behind him at the price that you need to pay in order to draft him, given what we've seen. I'd rather take, and there are some questionable takes that I'll have about pitchers going later on based on very small sample sizes, but I'd rather take chances on upside at that point in the draft than this early on.
Yeah, the premise of that is they're going later on, so that's the perk of it all. Yeah, you said it was Zach Plesac. I've dug into him quite a bit, and there's a lot to like about him. I get it, but man, like the sample. We want to talk sample sizes, like. You can say this guy can't trust this over here because of a sample size, but we can trust Zach Plesac's. It seems kind of hypocritical to me. So it's tough. I'm not saying it's not going to be good. There's like I mentioned with Kenta Maeda, like there could be some regression coming back. It'll still be good. Plesac could be having some regression, and it might not be good at all. So Plesac's floor and ceiling are so wide to me of what the outcomes could be with him that it's a scary proposition at this point in the draft. Ryu, I agree. He's just one of those guys everyone waits to blow up, and he just kind of keeps plugging along. It's like a 27.3% CSW. That's not sexy at all. Like that's just real. That's below league average. He works on command, like you say. He's a Hendricks type, just a little more strikeout upside. But you expect the AL East to catch up with him eventually. He was phenomenal last year. Maybe he runs hot still. I'll just have to kind of wait and see. Sonny Gray, I don't mind grabbing from time to time based on my roster at the time. I like the strikeout upside with Sonny Gray. I like the way he's been able to limit damage, even in Great American Small Park. He's pitching with his guys there, with the driveline guys and everything, and his old pitching coach. So I like Sonny Gray. I get the concerns with Sonny Gray. His command is very suspect at times, and that gets scary. But we've said it on a few other pitchers. Most of your games in the Central, not all, most of your games in the Central will help a ton. I just like what he can bring to the table there with Sonny Gray. So I have to pick one out of the three. It's Sonny Gray. If you don't want to take any of the three, I get it. But I do have Gray on a few rosters going into the season. The next set of pitchers, you mentioned his name earlier, Mr. Zach Greinke. Still not in camp yet, but don't panic. That's what Greinke does. He'll be just fine.
He's going to show up throwing 82, Bubba.
Yes. I just laughed when everyone was like, "Oh, he's not in camp." Like, has he ever shown up to camp on time? Like ever? Like he just doesn't care. Just relax. He's one of the guys that just doesn't need to throw. It's fine. He's the 40th starting pitcher off the board. Our 40th pitcher off the board. Framber Valley is 42nd. ADPs of 105.6 and 108.1. I put these two together for the fact that Greinke is the boring guy. You mentioned why, but he kind of spits out his numbers. And there's Framber Valdez, who had a monster season last year, but there's a lot of people suspect to him. So what are you doing with these two?
Wow, I didn't realize Framber had fallen that far.
It's becoming tastier, isn't it?
I drafted him at picks 60 something.
He's gone as low as one. He's gone as low as 125.
Wow, that's fascinating.
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, I like both of them a lot where they're going. I really didn't realize Framber was going that late. I don't know whether it's because of the 12-team aspect of the onlines or not, but yeah, I mean, with Greinke, I like Greinke a lot. He had better skills, arguably, in 2020 than he did in 2019. And the outcomes were just poor because of the BABIP. He's never had really a bad BABIP. And he went through a period where I think his BABIP against was 420 in 4 or 5 starts. And so that's something that works its way out over the course of a full season. And he just didn't have the opportunity to do that. And even despite that, I mean, he had an ERA in the very low 4s, a solid whip, and he'll get some wins. So I feel really good about Greinke. I like him a lot. He's a target of mine. And then Framber, I like a lot as well. I mean, I think, you have a small sample and all that jazz, but that curveball is great. 60+% ground ball rate. The strikeout rate was legit. The control gains at least look legit. And yeah, they could be a little bit higher over the course of a season, but I worry less about that with the extreme ground ball rate that he's able to generate. So, he's also going to make up for some of those guys that he walks or gives up hits to, but through double plays, when you have that extreme of a ground ball rate. So I like him a lot. I mean, as just a guy who can get a kind of a mid-3s ERA, like a 1-2 whip with a strikeout per 9, which would be absolutely, phenomenal to get, especially at that point in the draft as you're, SP3-ish territory. So yeah, I like all of them. I like both of them a lot.
Yeah, I'm a huge Framber Valdez fan. Like the fact he's dropping gets me more excited than because I haven't gotten a lot of shares of him because it seems like everyone else is excited earlier in draft season. Like you said, where you had to pick him, it was harder for me to pull the trigger at that point in the draft season. But man, if I can get him post pick 100, that becomes so nice. Like really, really intriguing. I just love everything about him. I was on him in DFS like crazy last year when he was cheap. I have him in many leagues. I picked him up in a dynasty league off the waiver wire last year. And trust me, he's not getting released anytime soon. So I just love everything about what he's doing. Only a 31% CSW, so it's not great, but a 20% called strike rate. Greinke has 21%, which isn't bad either. But you mentioned it with that curveball, he can throw it a ton, and the way it limits hard contact is just bananas. He gets tons of ground balls, tons of just weak contacts when he walks a few guys. It's like when you look at Luis Castillo's profile, where he can walk a lot of guys, but he limits hard contact and strike guys out with his changeup. Valdez is a poor man's Luis Castillo to me with a curveball. There's a lot of similarities there. He had a 54% ground ball rate. Castillo's got a huge ground ball rate. Obviously, Castillo's a much better pitcher. I'm not trying to say they're the same pitcher, but a lot of the things you like in a Luis Castillo, you have to kind of like in a Framber Valdez, in my opinion. And I'm not the best pitcher diagnostic guy, but just when I look at all the numbers and everything, there's similarities there in their pitches. Maybe a changeup's easier to throw consistently than a curveball. I don't know all that. But what Framber's doing, I like a lot. Greinke concerns me. I know you're a big Greinke guy, so obviously I'm not going to tell you. I'm not going to tell you not to take him. Oh my God, Framber Valdez had a 49.5% hard hit rate last year. He didn't limit hard contact as much as I thought last year, but he kept it on the ground.
Yeah, but
he kept it on the ground. Yep, not as concerned there. And barrel rate was lower. It was only 7.9%, so that's not as bad. But Greinke just concerns me for the fact that he was starting to get rope-a-doped quite a bit last year. He gets left out there and get in trouble like second and a half to third time through the lineup. He just didn't seem to have the Greinke of old, and it seemed like his velo was down a bit. Where he's going in drafts now isn't bad. I'll agree with that. That's very, very intriguing, but it just concerns me going forward. It's kind of one of those where he's getting older, and I kind of want to get off the train before it derails. And it might not derail this year, but I think it's coming sooner than later. So I'm out on Greinke this year. I'll just be kind of sitting away there. I'll definitely take Framber Valdez this year as I just keep flipping through this pitch leaderboard, and my God, it's awesome. Like Greinke, 24.5% K rate, 17% deserved K rate. That's quite a drop off. So I'm just concerned with him, but you're a smarter man than I am most of the time. So you go get him. The next three.
I will.
Oh, I know you will. That's why I wasn't going to try to tell you not to. I know you probably already have, so I'm not going to tell you otherwise. I'm not like some people on Twitter that say don't do this. Charlie Morton, 46 pitcher off the board. Dylan Bundy, 47. Joe Musgrove, couldn't do a podcast with Toby without talking about Joe Musgrove.
Joey
at
Musgrove.
48. Morton, ADP 117. Bundy, 121. Musgrove, 122. Musgrove's helium, it's coming. It's shooting up there. What are you doing with these three? The Wiley vet, the Bundy off a big year, Musgrove's velo's up. Everyone's excited.
I mean, out of all of them, I think Bundy interests me the most. I actually haven't drafted Musgrove at all. The cost is just too high for me.
Yep.
With Bundy, I think he's got two really good pitches in the changeup and slider. It's a slider, right? Yeah.
Yeah. Slider.
Which are really good. He's shown that he can pitch with the low velocity that he has, which is important. And I think he's got really nice. He keeps the walk rate low now. At least the control metrics, because he's able to generate so many swings and misses on both the changeup and the slider. So I really like that. He was solid last year. I think there's arguments to be made that maybe he was a little lucky in some respects and a little unlucky in other respects. So I think he's solid. I like him a lot. With Morton, I can't get behind it because of the age and because of the injuries last year. If he's full go during spring training, he looks healthy. There are no setbacks. Velo looks good. All of that jazz. Maybe I'd consider it just because of where the cost is, and we know that he's been able to do it before. But at this point in time, I really can't. I just can't get there with him because of the age and the injuries that he's had, and because I like some of the other guys that are kind of going here, or I've already drafted three pitchers at this point in time, so I'm just kind of going for offense. With Musgrove, I love Joey Musgrove. There was obviously the pitch mix change. He was throwing the curve a lot more. The velo was up. But this is every year, right? Every year the velo goes up a little bit at some point in time, and he looks a lot better. One thing that I found interesting as I dove into him for my PitchCom presentation was his in-zone contact rate actually never really wavered, despite the increased use of the curveball and all that stuff. So he remains a guy who, I think will have a difficult time having a strikeout rate that matches the underlying skills. because he's not able to dominate in the zone with his fastball. Obviously, that's where an uptick in fastball velo would help. But again, every year there's just some little minor injury, whether it's the abdominal thing that he had, in 2019, or, whatever it was that kept him out. This year, he just can never seem to get right and get on that plane. And I'm sure at some point in his career, he will. I mean, he's still only 27, I think. So he's younger than Luis Castillo, which is just amazing to me. And so I think he'll get there at some point in time, but I just can't pay. The cost is so high for him going right here with really, like, has he ever really done it before for a season? Not really. And you sometimes you just go on like what the skills show and all that jazz, and he's in a great situation. So it'll be interesting. I'm rooting for him, but unfortunately I probably won't have him except on my dynasty team.
Yeah, because that's your boy. You can't quit Joe Musgrove there. So
exactly, yeah.
Got to have him. But yeah, I'm with you. Bundy's the guy I want here. I was all in on him last year. Hard not to love him again this year. He was phenomenal with the pitch mix change, like you talked about, and it's been well documented with the Angels. And, a 2.8 deserved ERA, XOB only 3.35. That's not bad at all. He was just good across the board. And you mentioned Morton, 4 years ago, maybe would be awesome. There's just so many concerns with the age and the injury history that what are the Braves going to do? The Braves, do they go 6-man with all their young pitchers and kind of keep everybody safe? Their young and their old pitchers they have in town. There's just a ton of questions with Morton that I wish he was going later in drafts. I'm honestly surprised Bundy's not going higher in drafts. I figured he'd be getting a bump up there. He's he feels a lot like a Lance Lynn type, just maybe a slightly fewer innings, but he was going deep in a lot of games for the Angels last year. So he's got that upside to eat up some innings for you, I believe. And then there's Musgrove. Yeah, I can't pay this price for Musgrove. I'm not even going to go into it. There's just, you mentioned it all. It's nice and all. It's cool that his velocity was up, but it just doesn't really do it for me. His hard hit rate's still the same. The dynamic hard hit rate's not great. His strikeout rate was up because he threw more, threw harder, but if he's off, it's going to be ugly. And it's just 6-man rotation also in San Diego can limit some things as well. So I'll be off Joey Musgrove at this price point. A couple more to go here. We got Kevin Gausman, 53rd pitcher off the board at pick 131, and Patrick Corbin, the 52nd pitcher off the board at just right, like basically the same pick as Kevin Gausman, ADP wise. I brought these two together because Gausman, everyone's super happy about. Patrick Corbin used to go about 70 picks earlier, 80 picks earlier, had a rough year last year. Who knows? So where do you stand on these two?
Yeah, it's interesting. They're kind of like the opposites because Gausman had the increase in his velocity last year, which helped him become a better pitcher. And Corbin had a significant decrease in velocity last year and kind of lost a little bit, that slider that's so critical to his success. I haven't really been on Corbin. Part of me feels like I'm making a big mistake in doing that just because, if you just wipe out 2020, where's he going in drafts normally? Probably around like pick 45 or something like that. So he'll be a spring training monitor for me, I think. At the same time, he also struggled a little bit, if my memory serves me correctly, in the second half of 2019. And I think the control is getting a little out of hand. I think the challenge with him is, Luis Castillo has his changeup, and he relies so heavily on that to be successful. Corbin does the same thing, but if he doesn't have the slider, he doesn't have a 97-mile-per-hour fastball, and he doesn't have really another pitch that can help him out. And so he's so reliant on that slider. And he's pitched well with lowered velocity with the Diamondbacks. He did, but again, he's a little bit older, and so we'll see what he's able to do. I'm interested to see what his spring training is like. But right now I've been out. I like Gausman okay. Like if I'm really struggling, if I don't have a third starting pitcher by this point in time, I think I drafted him in one draft. It's tough to bump him up so much, but it's also like it's a velocity increase. The splitter continues to be a very effective pitch, but then he also developed, I think it was either the slider or changeup or something like not a like split change, but another changeup, whatever his second pitch that he had was better, at least sufficient enough, to make him effective along with the uptick in velocity. So again, it's tough to put a lot into 2020, but for pitchers, I think I put a little bit more into 2020 than hitters for sure. And I was impressed with what I saw with Gaussman, and a lot of the skills support what he was able to do.
Yeah, there's not a lot of bad things to say about Gaussman. The only thing is I'm probably not going to be paying the price for him for the fact that I get really nervous about the splitter being such a used pitch, because the splitter you can lose very quickly. If he loses the splitter, his fastball's not that dominant. It really isn't. So that concerns me a bit. He's pretty much a 2-pitch pitcher still, unless he really develops that third pitch. And that's my biggest concern. As a Giants fan, I hope he's great. I hope everyone dominates their fantasy season with him. I'm very skeptical about what's taking place there. Is it the longevity of that transformation? But we'll see. Could be totally wrong there. Like you said with Corbin, that's why I kind of brought it up. The numbers look terrific from last year. I do remember many times playing him as a value in DFS, and he'd be good until like the 5th inning, and then either that or they throw him out an extra inning he shouldn't have been out there type thing. They leave him out too long in games.
They did that with a lot of guys last year. I mean, Scherzer, Jesus.
Yeah, like the Nationals, like Corbin he'd be in the 5th, and he'd walk 2 guys, and instead of taking him out, he'd get like 2 more outs, and then they give up a 2-run double. Or just like it was just always something where it was, or in the 6th inning, or sometimes in the 7th inning. It was just very frustrating with Corbin. I'd love to be able to do that quickly and look back at it all, but I don't know how to do it quickly, so I haven't done it. Of like how many times that happened with him. But even with that being said, you look at his overall numbers, strikeout rate was down tremendously, still getting barreled up a lot. You mentioned the slider usage was bad, the velocity was down. It's a weird one. It's like part of me says he doesn't need to be a heavy velo guy because he can be a good pitcher. But if you're a 2-pitch pitcher, you probably need some darn velo. So it's very tricky. The biggest thing is we used to take him a lot higher, and it's very. He can still be that guy. I think he's the SP3 for the Nats, so he's not facing the ace that much. He's going to have some nice matchups there on the mound, and where he's going here, he has that potential to be much better than his ADP right now. At the same time, what we saw last year it could get worse too. So it's a very tough pick. I feel like if you're in an overall, Corbin's a very intriguing pick for me because I think he can give you that boost you're looking for. If you're in a standalone league, I'd probably just kind of sit back and let him go. But he's very, very intriguing. So that's why I wanted to bring him up in the conversation tonight. He's someone I think is kind of getting overlooked for the most part right now. But where he's going, I'll pick 131. We're not used to seeing that with him. All right. Next 2 pitchers off the board. We slide down a bit here. 62nd pitcher off the board, Frankie Montas at pick 164. 63rd pitcher off the board, Herman Marquez at pick 169. Marquez obviously in Coors Field, but he's been pretty good. Montas, after the back injury last year, was just absolutely horrific. So where do you stand on these 2?
Yeah, I haven't drafted either one of them. I think with Montas, we have the small little bit in 2019 where he was incredibly effective with that split finger fastball. But I think the challenge with him last year is he had the injuries, but he also didn't throw that split finger fastball as much, right? So you're kind of looking for him to get healthy, and you're also looking for him to change that pitch mix a little bit to throw the splitter more, which is his most effective pitch. Obviously, throwing for the A's is a really it's a great situation for any pitcher. So, but I just haven't been that interested. And part of it is also like just team construction from my perspective is a lot of times where he's going, like I have my 3rd starting pitcher by pick 100. And so I'm just not really, going after the guys who are in this range. So that's with Montas. I mean, Marquez, I definitely get it. But I just have a really hard time if you can't start him in Coors. I mean, I know that some people probably do, but just spending this pick with a guy that I don't like half of his starts already, it's probably a bad process from my perspective, but I'm just not that interested in going. I feel like I was deeply impacted by that outing he had against the Giants, like 2 years ago when he gave up 8 runs in 1/3 of an inning, because it was just like
juggernaut.
Yeah, just reinforced. Yeah, it was before the Giants were good too. It was like, and just reinforced that you can't really start him at Coors, Or, I mean, you can, and he's been decently effective there, but it hurts. And so I just would rather go with a different pitcher where he's going. So I'm kind of out on both of them, which seems to be a theme, I think, on on some of these. But yeah.
Yeah, this one's interesting to me. Montas, I'm kind of in on both these guys a little bit. Like I'm not fully in the pool, but I'm really I'm ankle deep on the Montas.
Mm-hmm.
I'm intrigued by, he's healthy finally. Again, he got COVID, so we'll see how healthy he is. But the back, really, you can document it last year. He was dominant the first 3 or 4 starts. Back injury forced him to miss a start. He was short they backed him up 2 days on his second start, and he just never really rebounded. So I don't know if that's why he didn't throw any splitters. I have no idea. That's still a concerning part. But he was never the same after the back injury regardless. So that's something I want to watch him this spring. I think there could be some bounce back there. Marquez, I've always preached never Coors. Marquez has grown on me tremendously this offseason. One of the biggest reasons, he used to be so much higher last year. Where he's getting drafted now, you can cherry pick his Coors starts. Where he used to go, he was an SP2 or 3 on most rosters. You kind of, where you drafted him, you kind of felt obligated you had to throw him in Coors. But where he's going now, he's your SP4, maybe SP5 if you're super aggressive on starting pitchers. So you can sit him for a week or something and not be too concerned about it. The other thing I'll mention is in a world where we're talking about innings being a concern, the dude is an innings-eating machine. He's projected for over 180 innings in all of them. He threw 81 innings last year. He threw 170, I think, the year before or prior. He's been a massive innings contributor. And lastly, what I'll mention, he had a 5.8 ERA at home last year, a 2-something ERA on the road. And you can't pick which starts you want to get rid of. But let me just say his home starts against the Giants, 7 1/3, 2 runs. Texas, 6 innings, 2 runs. Houston, 5 innings, 10 runs. Padres, 6 innings, 5 runs. Angels, 7 innings, 2 runs. Oakland, 3 runs in 6 2/3. So he got blown up by Houston. 5 runs isn't ideal either against San Diego. But in all honesty, if you draft him and you see San Diego's coming down, you probably don't pitch him that week anyways. You just don't. And then Houston, you probably debate that one as well. But I would, Giants, Texas, Angels, Oakland, you at least have the conversation in your head about pitching them, and those were not bad starts. So he gets a lot of strikeouts. He pitches a ton of innings. And I'm very, very much more in on Marquez this year than I've ever been in on Marquez. So it could be extremely, extremely scary coming into the season. But we'll see. And Jomo Baseball says, he could be a trade candidate. That is true. And then Jacob Stout even says, even Rocky had a Montas. So he's got a little jokes right there. So that's good as well. So I'm in on Marquez. And I've never been in Marquez, so I'm terrified.
Yeah. He was super lucky last year.
Yeah.
0.66 home run per 9, 1.22 for his career, super low strand rate. Interesting. Some skill regression as well. But I mean, I totally get it. And the trade candidate thing is legit, right? I mean, imagine if he gets traded mid-season, and you get a full half season of him somewhere else.
Yeah.
I mean, that could be huge
as well. So I don't know. It's just one of those where he's going now in drafts around pick 170 almost. That's so much different than what it was before. He's gone as low as 215 in some of these drafts. Past pick 200, it's hard for me to say no to Germán Marquez. It's really hard. So I think I'm finally there. 2 more to go here. Chris Bassett, pitcher 69, ADP 181. Tyler Mahle, pitcher 70 at 185. Bassett coming off a strong season. Mahle has got the stuff everyone wants to see. Can he put it together this year? Where do you stand on these two?
Yeah, I dig Mahle. I'm into him.
You do Mahle or you dig Mahle?
I dig. Yeah. I just think that he made some changes last year and I think this is kind of a consistent thing for the Reds pitchers where they're not giving in to hitters, and you see it maybe with Gray with the control and the walk rate. You see it with Castillo with his control issues and the walk rate as well. But, he had a really nice 4-seam fastball, both from a velocity perspective and impact. He could be a guy that benefits a lot from the dead end ball as well as a fly ball pitcher. that four-seam fastball cutter combination, just those two pitches allowed him to be pretty dominant down the stretch. Really nice swinging strike rate, just really nice, metrics kind of across the board. And now he's in the rotation and he'll be there. So I have him on at least a few teams, I think. I feel like I'm going to be more into him if he slides a little bit. He was going around like 150 to 165, I think, before. But interested in that. Bassett, I think I'm not really down with Bassett too much. I think he was pretty well. He's been like kind of consistently fortunate, but not really like a lot of swing and miss, not really a lot of strikeout. He doesn't. The walk rate. I don't know why he was able to maintain such a low walk rate. Doesn't have a good O swing. Was getting behind in the counts more than previous seasons. Didn't throw the ball in the zone more. So it seems like he's somebody who would probably have like a higher deserved walk rate. And then, so not going to strike out a ton of guys. Yeah, the ratios might be decent if he runs into a little bit of luck, but gives up too much contact for me. So I'm not that interested.
Yeah, at this point in the draft, it's a roster construction play for me. If I'm confident in my strikeouts, I don't mind Chris Bassett because I feel like his ratios overall won't be too damaging. Be on a good A's team, pitching in that good ballpark. Just strikeouts will be low. But he has a very, very good ground ball rate, limits the long ball. So I don't mind him at all in that respect. But you need to be pretty confident in strikeouts because he's not going to get you a ton. But he is very good at getting quality starts and getting the job done last year. He might be the A's #1 this year before Luzardo, but it's like Montas, Bassett, Luzardo up top there. So we'll see how that goes. I don't mind him in that respect, but Molly's at that up and coming stuff, big time strikeout guy. You just need to keep the ball in the ballpark. Like that hard hit rate, especially the lefties, is terrifying at times. But if he can fine tune that some more, he'll be very, very good. So he's definitely intriguing, worth a gamble at this point in time, and that's what differentiates these two for me. If you just want the safe guy and you're good on strikeouts, you just want the ratios, I don't mind Bassett at all. If you need some upside and hope he takes that next step, I think Molly's very, very good in that respect. So those are the way I look at those two going into this season. And the last one we have for you tonight, Dallas Keuchel, boring veteran pitcher, lots and lots of innings, not a lot to strikeouts. Where the heck is he? There he is. 73rd start, the pitcher off the board, pick 192. Aaron Savali, 74th off the board at pick 193. Aaron Savali, he kind of has that Tyler Mahle vibe to him, to me, where everyone's pumped on him coming up this year. And then you got Dallas Keuchel. So what do you got with these two?
Yeah, I think Keuchel, I have him on one team just because I needed volume so badly. It was actually the Battle of the Pods team, and I immediately regretted it just because he's not good from like any perspective whatsoever. I mean, the ratios will be fine, I think. If you look at his ERAs, the last 5 years, 4.55, 2.9, 3.74, 3.74, 1.99. The whips are a little bit more concerning, 112, 131, 137, 109. But he doesn't give up a lot of home runs. Like, he keeps the ball in the ballpark, gives up a ton of ground balls, not a lot of hard contact. He is what he is. You kind of know what you're getting with him, which I think is part of the value. And as you mentioned before, the volume. And one of the things to consider too is like for a guy whose weakness is strikeouts, it's less of a weakness this year, I think, because for a guy who can give you volume, I think that's one thing kind of going in his favor. Savali is very interesting. I know he's working on a new arm action in spring training. It looks like, the shorter arm work or whatever. I don't know anything about mechanics, so who am I kidding? But there was video of that, and that's one of the things that helped, propel Lucas Giolito. He added a little bit of velocity after he did that, and that could certainly go a long way for Savali, because I think the one thing that he lacks is a fastball that's decent. I mean, his sinker has generated a 2.3% and then a 2.8% swinging strike rate. But then he's got a diverse arsenal. He's got a cutter, he's got the curveball, he's got the changeup, all with double-digit swinging strike rates. He's even got some pitches that are effective in the zone, like the curveball, like the changeup. So I think there's a lot. There's a lot there that could go right for him. And I think it'll be really interesting to monitor him during spring training. He may be a guy that I'm a little bit more interested in. And I think you're going to see a lot of bold predictions from the anti-Plesac folks. Yeah. And I think it might have been Todd Zola who mentioned it. His bold prediction, or I don't know if it was official build prediction, but just that Aaron Savale would be better than Zach Plesac this year. So that'll be interesting to see. I'm really interested in seeing that.
Yeah, I remember seeing Zola do that, and I saw our buddy Mike Curlin second that thought. So it's going to be a very popular one out there for sure. And I don't mind Savale. I liked him a lot last year. He had a little up and down go of it, but I like the changes in mechanics, like Giolito. It also, I believe Alex Fast was talking about it, should help with his off-speed pitches as well and help with the tunneling, which is very big as well. So good stuff with that. And then Keuchel, like I even took him in a league as well. He's going to have good ratios, no strikeouts, lots of ground balls, limits hard contact, probably a decent amount of W's for the White Sox. Going to eat up a lot of innings. If you're in a quality star league, he gets it done a lot. It's just not sexy because there's no strikeouts. Like there's none. But it's another one of those guys, if you're comfortable in strikeouts, which I was in that league. I had Cole and a couple other guys where I was like, yep, I'm good. Get Keuchel to just kind of offset those the ratios for you and really lock things in. I don't hate that at all. So that's very intriguing. Real quick, before we go on here, Jacob Stout in the chat mentioned on our Molly versus Bassett talk, he says he doesn't know ATC has Bassett 140 Ks over 157 innings, a 4.07 ERA. Molly 161 Ks over 152 innings with a 4.52 ERA. His question was, is 20 strikeouts worth a half a run in ERA? To me, if you're needing strikeouts, it is, yes. But what say you?
Yeah, I mean, I honestly don't pay that much attention to projections for pitchers just because I don't think they respond quick enough. With Molly last year, 13.8% swinging strike rate, nearly 20% K- walk rate, a K% close to 30%, or more than 11 strikeouts per 9. The BABIP obviously stayed pretty low, so there may be some regression there, but he also dominates in the zone. Z contact at 80.4%, so much better than league average. Extreme fly ball pitcher, so maybe benefited by the dead end ball as well. So yes, ATC may project them for, slightly more strikeouts than Bassett. But I don't necessarily see that. Like ATC right now has him at slightly more than a strikeout per inning for Molly. But I think, given he had a totally new, I think the cutter was like a brand new pitch for him last year. Let me just double check. So the cutter, I mean, he threw 141 in 2019, but he really amped it up, 18.6% swinging strike rate. On that pitch, even his four seam has an 11.6% swinging strike rate, which is higher than Bassett's overall swinging strike rate. So I just think like the upside is much greater from my perspective. And, and Bassett could continue to limit contact in the same way that he has in the past. But, he's never 2 years ago, he almost struck out, one guy per innings pitched, 9.9% swinging strike rate, 14.6% K- walk rate, as I mentioned before. Not sure I believe that walk rate with underlying skills, doesn't get guys to chase, has never had a league average, chase rate. Yeah, can't really dominate in the zone that much either. Let me take a look at his pitch mix a little bit here. Yeah, maybe if he goes to the four seam a little bit more, maybe there's like a little bit more potential there for Bassett. Although if he goes to the four seam, theoretically, like my guess would be that, the contact may be a little bit worse. Yeah. So, there's give and take. I just think it's a matter of, I just think it's a matter of upside with Molly. Like, I think Molly can be a legit, very, very good pitcher. I don't think Bassett can necessarily get there. But it doesn't mean that Bassett doesn't have, like, he's a useful pitcher for me. And I think with Molly, I really like what I could potentially get from him. I think he could take a step and be a really, really good pitcher. And I'll kind of hedge a little bit on that one.
Yeah, no, and that's the thing is, like, Bassett is who he is. Like, there's really no more to go from there. If anything is down, then up. So that's what you're getting. Molly's got the ceiling. Like, Jacob Stout does say thank you, though. He didn't expect an answer, but he loves it. So thanks for.
Hey,
yep.
Jacob, if nothing else, we love to respond to listener questions.
Yeah,
and we very much appreciate people who join us in the stream.
Yep.
And ask questions. So thank you very much.
Yeah, Jomo Baseball's on the same side. Molly has all the upside, so he's with us on that one. But
and also, Jomo is a great nickname for Jordan Montgomery. It has not caught on, but Jomo. I mean, there's Logan Morrison.
Lomo.
He's got Lomo, and he's got Jordan Montgomery, and he's not Jomo.
Should
like come on, people.
Yep, no doubt about it. But I changed the header while you were talking there. This is part one because I was looking. There's a lot post 200, so we might talk about some more next week. Let's just do that instead of just saying like 20
late
guys
pitcher targets.
Yeah,
those are the podcasts that people listen to.
Yep, those can win leagues. Those can win leagues. So we'll go there, and we have a bunch of listener questions. So we'll head into those now and get that all taken care of for you. Krabby at the crab at the _crab_shack_ asks, any concern with spin rate cheaters with leagues supposedly cracking down on sticky stuff like Cole and Bauer? My answer is no, because they've been doing it for decades and they're going to continue to do it. And hitters actually want them to have sticky stuff, so they're not getting beamed with fastballs. So as long as it's not obvious, it's still going to happen. That's the way I see it.
Yeah, I'm not worried about it as well. I haven't heard anywhere that they're going to crack down on it. And I mean, quite frankly, like, teams have invested a ton of money into starting pitchers who use sticky substances to be effective. And the last thing I think baseball wants to do is come around and make pitchers less effective that teams have just given massive contracts to. So just purely from like a financial perspective, I don't think it makes sense. And I also think it's just really hard. I think it'd be really hard for them to do that, especially since they've known it's been there for so long and they haven't done anything about it. Like, cracking down on it now just doesn't really make a ton of sense to me.
Anthony, I always screw this up, I apologize. Gialde, he asks, I don't think I've heard anyone analyze it, probably because it's unknown, but what are we doing with the dead ball effect on Coors? Should we be moving Marquez up a bit? He has shown the ability to tame Coors in short stints. Could the dead ball push him up? Could he be a bargain? To me, I'm not too – the dead ball, when the smart people are saying it's like a 5% thing that really only hurts certain people, Coors Field to me. They have a humidor, and that's about as far as I think it's going to go. I already told people why I'm high on Marquez this year, but are you thinking that the dead ball helps him even more?
I don't think he's like a fly ball pitcher, is he?
Not really, no.
No, he's a high ground ball pitcher. He's a 50.6% ground ball pitcher.
That's why he survives those starts in Coors.
Yeah, he's not really one. And one misconception about Coors is that it's like a really good home run hitter's park.
BABIP park.
It's actually not. Yeah, it's a BABIP park. Yeah, so I don't think it really has a huge impact on his value much. I mean, it's a great question, but I just don't see him being a guy who's more impacted by it. The guys that I think are more impacted by it are like your high fly ball pitchers, right? Yeah. Who are going to have a higher volume of fly balls and are going to have fewer home runs as a result of that. And the BABIP is going to be lower for them as well. Well, I mean, it will be slightly lower maybe, but also you won't have the home runs factoring into the batting average, so.
And just for example, Marquez gave up 6 home runs last year in his 13 starts in his 84 or so 81 innings. Only 2 of those came at Coors. So he threw that game against the Giants 7-3, gave up 6 hits, no homers. That game against Houston, 10 hits, 10 runs, only 1 homer. San Diego, 8 hits, 5 runs, 1 homer, then no homers the rest of the way. 5 or more hits in every start. He actually had 5 or more hits in all but 2 starts the entire season, no matter where he pitched. but he keeps the ball in the yard pretty good. Doesn't walk a lot, strikes out a ton. So,
and one thing of note for Marquez is he was super lucky on home runs last year.
He's going to mention that many times. And
0.66 home runs per 9% home
it's
run
not
per 5
lucky when the
rate.
ball's hit on the ground all the time. It's just how it works.
Well, yeah, but I mean,
I know. Out of his
career
5 balls,
home run per 5 ball rate is 16.8%.
Yep.
And last year it was 9-point-something%. It just doesn't make any sense, people.
More sticky stuff, spin rate.
Let me get cranky for a second. No,
Toby's getting cranky here. Like I got cranky with Granky. There you go. Rob DPH, or our buddy at Deadpool Hitter, asked, if you feel strong about there being no DH, what is your biggest adjustment for starting pitchers, and who is the biggest loser drop in rank? I still think there's going to be a DH, but if you don't, obviously you move some National League guys up. That's just what it looks like to me. What say you, Toby?
Yeah, Rob, I let the projections do the work for me. Actually, that's a lie, because I don't really look at. I look at projections for pitchers, generally speaking, but I don't know. I don't have a good answer for you, Rob. I think I just kind of think about the pitcher and overall context and whether I want them on my team, which is probably a weakness that I should.
And Toby's one of the best NFBC players out there. Remember that, folks. There you go. That's good stuff.
I have a very short track record on that one. I appreciate the commentary, but I have a very short track record.
You're damn good in that short period. Doug Fraley Jr. at Doug_Fraley asks, with it looking like there will be no NLDH, are you guys seeing NL pitchers getting any slight bumps? We can talk about that. Seems like I haven't noticed it acknowledged much in the fantasy world. Yeah, we just hit on that, Doug. It will impact the National League pitchers. That's why, like we talked at the very beginning, DeGrom's over Cole now. Last time Cole was over DeGrom. So it might not be a dramatic shift, but you're going to see National League pitchers get a bump. It's just the way it's going to go. So that's what you'll see.
It makes you feel better about guys like Nola, too. Where,
I'm with you 100% there.
Like guys who maybe you don't think of as having a ton of K upside, but that little like 1 or 2 more strikeouts per game is huge.
That's a good bump for German Marquez too.
He's gonna get traded to the AL probably.
That'd be my luck, yeah. To like
gonna get traded to the AL East.
Yeah,
to Camden. The Orioles are gonna make a big move for him. He's in trouble.
They're gonna get off to a 2-month hot start and go, we're going all in.
Yeah.
Yep. Trading DJ Stewart to Colorado to get me excited for German Marquez. Guillermo Salve asks, these are some quick hitters. Do you think Giolito's ready to step into Tier 1? I say yes. What say you?
Yes, I do.
Yeah. Can Ian Anderson keep it up? I say no.
I say no.
Yeah. Well, Frankie Montas, remember he has a splitter. I say yes.
I say no.
Okay, there we go. We disagree on one.
Well, it depends on what remember means in terms of a percent usage.
Yeah, I think basically, you think he throws it more than he did last year?
He really should.
I'd say yes.
Maybe I'll say yes. Maybe I'll say yes.
The
but then
have
I should want to draft him, Bubba, and that just messes me up.
True. Does David Price have any value if he's playing this year? Yes.
Yeah, totally. I think he's going to play. I think he'll be really good.
What's Eduardo Rodriguez's healthy ceiling? Erod came out the other day and said he feels fully healthy from everything. He's been throwing on the side. He's ready to throw 30 starts again this year. Of course, he's excited. We'll see what he does. What do you think his healthy ceiling is?
Yeah, they're gonna have to monitor the innings pitched considerably. So I think there's a limited upside there. But where he's going, that's kind of baked into the cost, going in the mid 200s, I think. So he's definitely an interesting dart throw there. Not dart throw because he's good, but like
that's what I love about where he's going. What if over under 140 innings?
Under considerably.
Okay. I think he pushes at the 140. I really do, because they have nothing to lose there. They really don't. If Severino makes it back in June, how awesome would that be? I'm not touching Severino.
That would not be awesome, because I am not a fan of Severino on this podcast.
There we go.
The destroyer of dreams himself, Luis Severino, the man who gave us the second half of 2018, I think. Was that 2018 that he gave us, where he just destroyed all of us?
Crushed us all. Yeah. All the hopes and dreams.
Yeah, I remember that. My memory goes back. No, honestly, I'm not. I think Severino's fine. I think he's a little overrated, but And with Tommy John, you just never know how guys are going to respond.
And
I don't not that interested.
And the Yankees have extra weapons. They have no reason to push them. Like, if anything, get them ready for a couple of postseason appearances, maybe. Like, they have no reason to push them. John Wilder at John Wilder 84 asks, so many people talk about getting those big inning guys this year due to 2020 being short. Am I wrong for loading up on high-quality guys who may only pitch 110 to 150? 2 starting pitchers with 180 innings pitched with a high 3 ERA is worse than 3 starting pitchers with 120 innings and a 3.5 ERA. Are innings pitched overrated a little?
No, I mean, I think it's a good point. I mean, one of the questions is will the volume of the top starters be what you expect it to be relative to what it usually is? If that makes sense at all. But I think the problem with the question is it assumes that there are guys that are going to go 110 to 150 and have really good ratios that don't cost a lot in drafts. I don't know. That's like Corbin Burns for me, maybe. And even with Corbin Burns, I think there's a big question mark about whether the ratios will be there again, at least in the way that they were this year. So I understand the question. And I guess the major question is, yes, there could be a difference there, in terms of maybe the relative difference between some of the aces and some of the guys, further back in the pack is fewer, right? Like, there's less of a difference there. But I think one of the things when you pay up for the aces is you're paying for the ratios as well, right? You're paying for good ratios, guys that have proven that they can have good ratios. And I just don't see that there's guys who are going to pitch 110 to 150 innings this year that have those types of ratios that aren't going high in drafts. I mean, that's like Kenta Maeda and, guys like that, maybe, like I mentioned whatever his name is, Burns. You could also say the same thing maybe about Plesac, because they probably won't push him that hard. So I think that the question is a little bit flawed in that sense, but I totally get what you're saying. And I was thinking about that a little bit. Like, I do think that the relative difference between the aces and maybe some of the guys lower back, like further back in terms of volume, could be less than it usually is. It also could be more, right? And that's one of the challenges going into 2021 is we just don't know.
Yeah, and it's like, I get what he's saying. That's why in years past I've talked about guys like Strasburg and some others that I'd rather have 150 quality innings from them than 180 from somebody else. So that's kind of where he's going with it. But like Jacob Stout says in the chat, fewer innings pitch also means fewer wins, fewer quality starts, and also probably fewer strikeouts. So are you going to sacrifice these other categories for just your ratios, or you can maybe help your ratios out with different closers, relievers, something like that? So there's different ways to go about it. Dave Petroziello asks, there are some very smart people in fantasy baseball Twitter that are showing John Means a lot of hate. I like him, and I know Toby does too. So why are we right?
Yeah, I mean, I think what Dave is referencing is Rob Silver on the latest episode of the Launch Angle podcast, kind of got upset at those of us, myself included, who are drafting John Means where we are, as well as Drew Smiley where we are. And I think he had a lot of really good points. I mean, a lot of salient points. And I wish I had really astute, kind of ways of coming back. But I think one of the things at this point in the draft, I think that there is very few kind of sure things, if you will. Like I think there's a lot of question marks about a lot of the pitchers going in this area of the draft. And I want to look at upside. With Means in particular, I mean, I think you can point to the velocity increase. His increase was substantial. I think it was 2 miles per hour or more, in the season. He was injured and then he went on the bereavement list. But when he came back, he was really good, from just a skills standpoint, swinging strike rate, O swing. He has a very low walk rate. So while home runs are certainly an issue with him as a major fly ball pitcher, home runs are an issue. He's still able to manage to keep a very low whip, throughout his career because he has a very high O swing. He's got the four-seam fastball that was generally generating like above like 12%, I want to say, swinging strike rate on it. He also has the changeup, which is not necessarily a dominant pitch quite yet, but still generates a pretty significant swinging strike rate. And then he's got the curve, which I think is a lesser pitch. But I think there are there is the potential there for him to be really good. I also think he's benefited by the dead end ball because he is a fly ball pitcher. And so, when I look at Means, I think, if things don't go great, the ERA will probably be high. I think the whip will continue to be pretty low because he's a fly ball pitcher and because he doesn't walk guys necessarily. So that will at least be helpful. I think he's shown that he can get, a K per 9, especially if the bump in velocity holds, which traditionally it has held when those happen towards the end of the year. And so I think there's a lot to like with Means as well. And I think especially the whip piece, at this area of the draft, like I like that low whip from John Means, which for me makes him, a guy that actually is going up in my estimation, I think, because of the dead end ball. And I think I've shared on Twitter the rolling average graph that he had over his last 5 games. And yeah, it's only the last 5 games. It's recency bias, whatever. But when I can actually point to a reason why, he's improving like a fastball velocity when there's a material change, then I don't think there's a reason why I shouldn't necessarily believe that he'll be able to maintain that in the future. So that's kind of my case for John Means, why I like him a lot heading into next year. But again, people with very reasonable takes can disagree on these things. They can, not want to draft John Means, and that's great because that means that we get to draft John Means, Dave.
Yeah, there you go. The increased velo and then just the proper pitch mix with which we saw at times last year would be tremendous for John Means. That'd be big. And as much as I don't want it to happen because of Trey Boo and others, just watch them put a humidor in Baltimore. There's some stadiums getting humidors. Let's just wait and see what happens.
Bubba, dead in the ball and a humidor for John Means. I mean, we could be talking about the Cy Young Award winner here.
It'd be pretty wild stuff.
Out of Baltimore.
Be pretty wild.
With 2 wins. 2 wins, but great ratios.
Ben Tid at Breaking Ben _T says, how many teams do you think will have 6-man rotations? And should we be significantly downgrading pitchers on those teams? I think the Angels, Mariners, and possibly the Cubs are the ones I know of. I've been in some chats that talked about it, so I got the info here. Seattle, Detroit, Angels, the Reds, Padres, Cardinals, Dodgers, and Cubs have all mentioned it. So they're all discussing it. So about that's 8 or 9 teams. So you're almost a third of the league. I wouldn't be shocked if we see more, or if we see more of those phantom DLs and guys get pitched. It might not be 6-man rotations at the right time, but you see about 7 guys get their chances type situation. I think a lot of teams are starting to go that way. And Rob Silver, let me pull this up real quick.
Yeah, that was a really good tweet.
I just want to mention this because, Rob does smart stuff that I'm too lazy or too dumb to figure out. So he brought up the point because in the recent Mind in the News, the Padres mentioned it. And so he, in the Mind in the News from Jeff Zimmerman, he said, okay, let's do some math on, say, Darvish. Normal rotation, if he stays healthy, you get 32 starts. 6-man rotation, you get 26. Darvish's average 6 innings per start, 6 less starts, 36 less innings. That takes him down to 156 from his projection. Let's say he's at 11 K per 9. That's 44 less Ks. Say the Padres are very good and he's lucky, gets a win every second start, so he loses 3 wins. 44 Ks, 3 wins, and 36 less innings of quality ratios is a massive drop from that valuation from where he's getting picked towards the end of round 1, early round 2. So you got to kind of look at, I guess, where they're getting drafted. Does that hit cost as much? And in reality, it's going to definitely take them out of starts that they normally have. The caveat, if I have to play devil's advocate, is Simeone mentioned it when I talked to him, and I can't remember where he said he got it from. I think Ray from Baseball HQ's talked about it too. If they're only pitching, say, once a week now, they might get to go a couple extra innings per start because they're stretched out some more. And they might be, like Kikuchi last year is a great example. He pitched better because he had a lot of extra days rest. He was fresher. That could be a benefit for some of these kind of middling pitchers. So the aces, I think, take a big hit. The middling guys could actually kind of get a boost in theory, if that makes sense. So what's your thoughts, Toby?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if I have the wrong perspective on this. I'm kind of like, I mean, with some of them, it makes sense. But with some of them, I'm just like, I'll believe it when I see it. Because it's like, it assumes a number of things. Like, number one, I think it assumes health, right? So it assumes that like everybody stays healthy that can compete. it also, in some respects, I almost feel like it assumes that we're going to have expanded playoffs because, like with the Padres, and obviously some of it's like the pitching, the innings pitched because of what, because of the previous season. But like with the Padre, like with a lot of these teams, I mean, if we don't get the expanded playoffs, like it's hard to make the playoffs like regularly, right? And so you can't really be throwing not great pitchers, every 6 games. I mean, with some of the bad rotations, I mean, the Mariners, we know what's going to happen, right? I mean, with the Cubs, like maybe they do it so that Kyle Hendricks gets like less starts, but or like their Alec Mills gets less starts, or like, Zach Davies gets less starts. So I'm kind of in a I'll believe it when I see it type of mode, and hopefully we'll have a better understanding of that, because I also think it's something where, let's say you start out with a 6-man rotation, and pitchers are creatures of habit. We know that. And then your 6th starter gets injured, right? And then do you cut it down to a 5-man rotation? Do you mess with what you've set up throughout the course of the season? Like as you get down the stretch and the games become more important, do you cut it down a little bit? So maybe I buy it for some of the cellar dwellers, like some of the teams that aren't going to be good this year. But for a team like the Padres, I just have a really hard time thinking that that's what they're going to end up doing, because and what if Nelson Lamet gets it, doesn't.
I was about to say that. I was about to say that you don't have to worry about it when that happens.
And it's just like, and then you're going to have Morion like go 3 or 4 innings, in his 6th start, and then you're going to use up your bullpen finishing that game off. It's just, for me, there's too many questions about it, at least for the good teams, for it to make sense. And a lot of the teams you mentioned, I mean, let's be honest with you, like the Tigers and the Mariners, I mean, the Orioles, yeah, there's John Means, but is there really anybody else in that rotation that's like jumping out at you? Like, so I don't know. I'm not super worried about it. And I just don't think anybody's going to mess with the aces, right? Like, you don't want to mess with DeGrom. You don't want to mess with Cole. You don't want to mess with any of those guys. So I'm not as concerned about it. Maybe I will look super foolish, which would not be the first time that that's happened. But I tend to think that that if we see it, it'll be from guys who are further down in the standings.
Yeah. Nick at InBiscardi17 asks, can you touch on massive jumps or drops from such small samples? I understand the pop-up guys because it's all we have, but is the industry putting way too much emphasis on 2020 sample for guys with longer track records? Bundy and Bieber way up, Buehler way down, for example. It's the narrative street. Like, what fits your narrative is the way I see it. I look at all the samples and use them as a grain of salt. Like you mentioned, velo is something you can definitely look at. That's a difference maker. But there's other changes that, if there's a physical change, I can see it. But there's like COVID issues that we don't know about. There's all kinds of other issues we don't know about. So you have to kind of look at each situation differently. I'm not as concerned on Buehler as other people are, but I see what he's saying. What's your thoughts on this?
Yeah, I mean, I think you look at each player individually. I mean, just the examples that you gave, though. I mean, just think about, like, Bieber was going, like, his ADP last year was like 17.
Yeah.
Like, like he was an ace. Like, he was a top 7 or 8 starting pitcher, like, heading into last year. So, yeah, he's bumped up a little bit. He also added a tick of velocity. He added a new pitch with the cutter that he throws. Like, he's a better pitcher. Like, there was differences. Buehler's still like going in the top 20 in ADP or something close to that, at least. Right. So it's not like he's like fallen from grace or anything like that. I think there's just maybe a recognition that either he's a slow starter, which has happened to him a couple of years in a row, or he's probably not going to get the same type of volume because he throws for the Dodgers, maybe, which seem like relevant, concerns. So I think there are instances where guys are getting dropped, like Greinke is a good example for me, where the skills are better in 2020 than they were in 2019 in a lot of ways. And yet, he's fallen really far because he had some really bad BABIP days, and I think there are other examples that are similar to that. Maybe Corbin, who we covered before, again, he's dropped like he was going around pick 42, 40 to 45 last year. And now he's all of a sudden like at pick 150 or something like that. Like maybe that's too much of a reaction, but it's also as a result of the velocity dip and maybe the slider being a little less effective and his reliance on that pitch. So, and again, we're still in late February. I think there's still an opportunity for the ADP to shift dramatically here as we get closer to March and we get an idea of how guys are feeling. We get reports. We see them throwing in spring training. And while you shouldn't put too much emphasis on spring training, obviously, there are things like, velocity readings. There are things like, I think even like, when you get to the extremes of like strikeout rates and walk rates and things like that in the spring, we can kind of pay a little bit of attention to those types of things. So that's kind of my thing on it. But certainly, I mean, recency bias impacts us all, and there's no doubt that that's going to happen, and it happens every single year, right? So.
Yep, no doubt about it. Spring training games start in about 5 days, so we'll start getting some real fun stuff to look at here pretty soon. At JW the Gamer asks, concerned about Garrett Cole supposedly not having his personal catcher. I am not, for two reasons. I'm pretty sure if he wanted him, he'd have him. I'm pretty sure he could walk in and be like, hey, I want my guy. Secondly, if it goes bad for 1 or 2 starts, I think he'll have him back. So if we have a full 162 like it looks like we'll have, we saw Cole start out slow pretty much every season and then just turn into a robot. So what you're getting out of Cole, I'm not too concerned about it.
Yeah, I mean, I haven't seen that, and I'm probably behind on the news a little bit, but it's like, yeah, I mean, if there's really a thing between Ishikawa, between Cole and Higashioka, am I saying it right?
Something like that, yeah.
Yeah. Then yeah, he'll throw to him. That I don't think that's really a thing, and I would be surprised actually if like he doesn't throw to him. If that's something that he's noticed is actually important to him and identified that as something that's important to him, then I think that'll happen, even if it's opening day. Like they want Cole to be successful. They want the team to be successful. They'll do what it takes to make that happen.
Yeah, Greg Maddux had his own personal catcher, Eddie Perez, for years, even though Javi Lopez was there to hit. So if the ace wants their catcher, he will get their catcher. Don't worry about that. And the last question we have,
Javi Lopez, huh?
Javi Lopez, yeah, back in the day.
That's a great reference.
So baseball pods, he mentioned this right after we started recording.
No.
I hope you two address the elephant in the room that Justin and Mason and him discussed on the TGFBI pod. I talked about it in our Battle of the Podcast chat. I thought it was very shisty of Justin Mason, and I'm saying this very sarcastically, because Justin Mason, Chris, Baseball Pods, he was talking about on the show how nice we were to basically to go in together to open up another spot for another team, and Justin Mason said, "Don't believe them. It's collusion to double up their viewership to add a stronger component to the masses." So that's the elephant in the room.
Wow.
I think Justin Mason should worry about his 4 other pods or whatever he has in the pool and not worry about this. But that's just what he does.
Yeah. For those who weren't aware, so last year, Bubba and I went in separately with our podcast. We haven't been doing it as long, but I mean, really, the thing is, pretty much all my podcasts this year, except for maybe a few of them, have been with you. So I felt like it made sense. And then also, as we mentioned, I think at the time there was a lot of discussion about which pods should be in it and things like that. And we felt like it would open up a spot. So Justin Mason may not know what it's like to be unselfish.
Yeah.
But
you're talking to a guy that has like 20
t-shirts
with his face on it. He has 20 t-shirts with his face on it. So unselfish is very, very difficult.
For sure. I mean, this is a selfless podcast that we do here, Bubba.
We're the podcast of the people. So I don't know what Mason's up to.
For sure. We are virtuous, and egalitarian,
the way I see it, Toby, is usually people with blasphemous statements like Justin Mason made, they're usually because they're scared.
Yeah, they're hiding something.
That's the way I see it.
They're hiding behind the veil of fear.
Yeah.
And going after other people. I think this is about promoting. This podcast is about promoting other podcasts instead of bringing them down. So that's why when we are up and it's our time, you will see us be positive. You will see us asking people who listen to the pod, who enjoy the pod, to vote for us. We will not denigrate our opponents or do threads about how terrible each one of the podcasts are and why you should vote against them. That is not something that we will, we'll not stoop to that level.
And some below the belt stuff there. It's unacceptable. It's unacceptable.
Totally.
But hey, teach their own.
I'm getting cranky.
Yeah, and on that note, before we get too cranky, we'll wrap this thing up. But next week we'll hit some more starting pitchers up, get some more listener questions. So keep them coming. Love the chatter in the live chat room. So keep everything coming. Check out Toby on Twitter at BatFlipCrazy. I'm on Twitter at BDintric. This is Bubba the Bat Flip, episode 72, Fantasy Baseball Starting Pitcher Part 1 review. Catch you guys later.